everything changed.
Skeletor took my family.
I need every man, woman, or then when you fall. You may have the power.
And he destroyed our world.
I'm gonna fight for them. Well, I got your chance to stand tall. But you're too scared to use it.
Trust me, I know how to use it.
It's all my fault. I know how it feels to fail.
I never stopped trying to get back home.
The universe shall quake in my shadow.
Light years away on Earth. I know most of you don't remember me. But I know all of you.
I have the power!
This is my home. Can't do it without you.
Somebody wants to brawl.
Since you left.
It's all gone.
You tell everyone that you're from another planet.
Take the sword.
Whatever that is. It just makes you sound a little very...
In an era where Hollywood continues to revisit beloved franchises from previous decades, few properties carry the nostalgic appeal and cultural recognition of Masters of the Universe. For many fans who grew up during the 1980s, the name instantly evokes memories of action figures, animated adventures, and the iconic battle between He-Man and Skeletor. After years of development challenges, changing studios, and countless rumors regarding its production, Masters of the Universe 2026 finally arrives as a major live-action reboot that seeks to reintroduce one of popular culture's most recognizable fantasy worlds to modern audiences. Directed by Travis Knight and starring Nicholas Galitzine as Prince Adam/He-Man, the film represents an ambitious attempt to transform a cherished toy-based franchise into a contemporary cinematic epic capable of competing with today's biggest fantasy and superhero blockbusters. The significance of Masters of the Universe 2026 extends far beyond its status as another franchise revival. The original Masters of the Universe brand emerged in the early 1980s through Mattel's highly successful toy line, which quickly evolved into an animated television series that became a defining part of childhood for an entire generation. The adventures of Prince Adam, who transforms into the mighty He-Man through the power of the Sword of Power, introduced viewers to the magical world of Eternia, a realm filled with heroic warriors, mystical forces, and unforgettable villains. At the center of this universe stood Skeletor, one of animation's most iconic antagonists, whose relentless pursuit of power created the foundation for countless adventures. Over the decades, the franchise expanded through comics, animated reboots, video games, novels, and merchandise, maintaining a loyal fanbase despite periods of reduced mainstream visibility. However, translating the success of Masters of the Universe into live-action cinema has historically proven difficult. The 1987 live-action adaptation starring Dolph Lundgren as He-Man developed a cult following but failed to achieve significant critical or commercial success. While some fans appreciated its campy charm and ambitious spirit, others felt it lacked the scale, visual imagination, and faithfulness necessary to fully capture the magic of Eternia. For years afterward, Hollywood repeatedly attempted to relaunch the franchise through various film projects, yet none managed to progress beyond development stages. Numerous directors, writers, and production companies became attached to potential adaptations, only for those plans to be delayed, revised, or ultimately abandoned. As a result, the announcement of a new live-action film generated considerable curiosity and skepticism among longtime followers who had witnessed previous attempts fail to materialize. What makes Masters of the Universe, 2026, particularly noteworthy is its positioning within the modern entertainment landscape. Today's audiences have become accustomed to expansive fantasy worlds brought to life through cutting-edge visual effects and large-scale storytelling. Franchises such as superhero universes, epic fantasy sagas, and science fiction adventures have demonstrated that viewers are eager to invest in richly detailed fictional worlds when they are presented with compelling characters and high production values. Consequently, many fans viewed this reboot as the perfect opportunity to finally realize Eternia's full cinematic potential. Advances in CGI technology, motion capture performance, digital world building, and action choreography offered filmmakers tools that simply were not available during earlier adaptation attempts. Expectations naturally grew as audiences imagined what Castle Grayskull, Snake Mountain, Battle Cat, and the diverse landscapes of Eternia could look like when rendered with modern filmmaking techniques. The film also carries the responsibility of introducing the franchise to a new generation unfamiliar with its origins. While older audiences possess a deep emotional connection to He-Man and his allies, younger viewers may have little knowledge of the property beyond occasional references in popular culture. Therefore, the reboot must serve two distinct purposes simultaneously. It needs to satisfy devoted fans who have waited decades for a definitive adaptation while remaining accessible to newcomers encountering these characters for the first time. Achieving this balance is one of the most difficult challenges facing any modern reboot. Leaning too heavily into nostalgia risks alienating new audiences, while drastic changes to established mythology can disappoint longtime supporters. The success of Masters of the Universe, 2026, largely depends on how effectively it navigates this delicate balance. Another major factor contributing to the anticipation surrounding the film was its creative team. Director Travis Knight earned recognition for his ability to combine emotional storytelling with impressive visual spectacle, leading many fans to believe he was well-suited to handle a property that blends fantasy adventure with character-driven drama. Similarly, the casting decisions attracted widespread discussion across fan communities and entertainment media. Nicholas Galitzine's portrayal of Prince Adam represented a fresh interpretation of the iconic hero, while the supporting cast brought considerable talent and credibility to the project. The involvement of established performers in key roles suggested that the filmmakers intended to treat the material seriously rather than relying solely on nostalgia or brand recognition. Marketing campaigns further amplified excitement by emphasizing the film's epic scope and commitment to world building. Promotional materials highlighted breathtaking environments, large-scale battles, and the timeless conflict between good and evil that lies at the heart of the franchise. Trailers introduced audiences to a visually striking version of Eternia while teasing the emotional journey of Prince Adam as he embraces his destiny as He-Man. For many viewers, these previews signaled that the film aimed to deliver more than simple action spectacle. Instead, it appeared focused on exploring themes of responsibility, courage, identity, and sacrifice, elements that have always been central to the franchise's enduring appeal. The expectations surrounding Masters of the Universe, 2026, were therefore exceptionally high. Fans hoped the film would finally provide the definitive live-action interpretation that previous adaptations had failed to achieve. Many anticipated a story that would faithfully respect established mythology while expanding it in meaningful ways. Others looked forward to seeing legendary characters receive deeper characterization and emotional complexity. There was also widespread curiosity regarding how the filmmakers would handle iconic elements such as the transformation sequence, the mystical power of Grayskull, and the larger conflict between Eternia's defenders and Skeletor's forces. Each of these components carries immense significance for longtime enthusiasts, making their execution critical to the film's overall reception. Beyond fan expectations, industry observers viewed the project as a potential test case for the viability of toy-based cinematic franchises in the contemporary market. While several toy-inspired films have achieved commercial success, others have struggled to connect with audiences. Consequently, Masters of the Universe, 2026, faced pressure not only to entertain but also to demonstrate that classic toy properties can evolve into sophisticated, large-scale cinematic experiences. Its performance would likely influence future decisions regarding similar franchise adaptations and revivals. Ultimately, Masters of the Universe, 2026, arrives as more than a simple reboot. It represents the culmination of decades of anticipation, creative ambition, and fan dedication. The film carries the weight of an iconic legacy while attempting to establish a new future for one of fantasy entertainment's most enduring franchises. Whether viewed as a nostalgic return to childhood memories or an introduction to an expansive new world, the movie enters theaters with enormous expectations and considerable cultural significance. As audiences prepare to once again hear the legendary declaration, "By the power of Grayskull," the question remains whether this ambitious adaptation can truly deliver the epic adventure that fans have imagined for generations. As one of the most anticipated fantasy reboots in recent years, Masters of the Universe, 2026, raises several important questions regarding its success as both a standalone film and a franchise revival. These questions serve as a framework for evaluating the movie's strengths, weaknesses, and overall impact on audiences. The first and perhaps most significant question is whether the film successfully revives the Masters of the Universe franchise for modern audiences. After decades of failed development attempts and mixed reactions to previous adaptations, the 2026 reboot carries the responsibility of restoring confidence in the brand. Fans expect a faithful yet contemporary interpretation that captures the spirit of the original characters, mythology, and themes while updating them for today's cinematic landscape. The film's ability to balance nostalgia with innovation is crucial in determining whether it can establish a strong foundation for future installments. Another key consideration is whether the movie can appeal to both longtime fans and newcomers. Veteran fans bring decades of emotional investment and familiarity with Eternia, He-Man, Skeletor, and the franchise's extensive lore. They expect recognizable characters, iconic moments, and respect for the source material. Meanwhile, younger viewers and those unfamiliar with the franchise require accessible storytelling, engaging character development, and a compelling narrative that does not rely solely on nostalgia. A successful adaptation must bridge this gap by satisfying existing fans while simultaneously introducing new audiences to the world of Masters of the Universe in a way that feels exciting and approachable. The film also invites comparisons with previous adaptations, particularly the 1987 live-action Masters of the Universe movie. While that film has developed a loyal cult following over the years, it was often criticized for its limited budget, reduced focus on Eternia, and departure from elements of the original mythology. The 2026 version benefits from modern filmmaking technology, larger production resources, and decades of storytelling evolution. Therefore, an important question is whether it improves upon its predecessor by delivering a more immersive, visually spectacular, and faithful representation of the franchise's universe. Another area of evaluation concerns the film's world building. Eternia has always been one of the franchise's greatest strengths, blending science fiction, fantasy, magic, and adventure into a unique setting. Does the movie successfully bring this world to life in a believable and engaging way? Are locations such as Castle Grayskull, Snake Mountain, and the Royal Kingdom of Eternos portrayed with enough detail and grandeur to captivate audiences? The portrayal of the central conflict between He-Man and Skeletor is equally important. Their rivalry is one of the most recognizable hero versus villain relationships in fantasy entertainment. Viewers may ask whether the film gives sufficient depth and motivation to both characters, transforming their battle into more than a simple struggle between good and evil. A compelling antagonist can significantly enhance the overall narrative, making Skeletor's role a crucial factor in the film's success. Questions may also arise regarding character development. Does Prince Adam's journey from an uncertain young man to the legendary He-Man feel meaningful and believable? Are supporting characters given enough attention to contribute to the story, or do they merely exist to support the main plot? Since modern audiences often expect emotionally rich storytelling, character arcs play an essential role in determining whether the film resonates beyond its action sequences. The effectiveness of the film's visual presentation is another major point of discussion. With advancements in CGI, practical effects, and cinematic technology, viewers expect fantasy blockbusters to deliver breathtaking visuals and immersive action. Does Masters of the Universe 2026 meet these expectations? Are the action scenes exciting and memorable? Does the film successfully translate the colorful and imaginative aesthetic of the original franchise into a convincing live-action format? Finally, the film raises questions about its long-term impact on the franchise. Can it launch a successful series of sequels, spin-offs, or expanded stories set within Eternia? Does it leave audiences eager to explore more of this universe, or does it function primarily as a standalone experience? The answer to these questions will ultimately determine whether Masters of the Universe 2026 becomes a defining moment in the franchise's history or simply another chapter in its ongoing evolution. These questions provide a valuable lens through which the film can be analyzed, helping audiences assess not only its entertainment value but also its effectiveness as a modern revival of one of fantasy's most enduring franchises. Going into Masters of the Universe 2026, expectations were undeniably high. As a longtime fantasy franchise with a devoted fanbase spanning several generations, the film carried the burden of reviving a beloved property while also proving its relevance in a modern cinematic landscape dominated by superhero epics and large-scale fantasy adventures. Years of development delays, casting announcements, promotional campaigns, and fan speculation had only increased anticipation, making the final product one of the most closely watched franchise reboots in recent memory. My initial reaction upon watching the film was one of cautious admiration. From the opening scenes, it became clear that the filmmakers were committed to delivering a larger and more ambitious vision of Eternia than audiences had ever seen in live-action form. The movie immediately establishes a sense of scale and grandeur, introducing viewers to a visually rich world filled with towering castles, mystical landscapes, advanced technology, and legendary warriors. Unlike previous adaptations that struggled to fully capture the franchise's fantasy elements, this version embraces its source material with confidence, creating an experience that feels both familiar and refreshingly modern. Before viewing the film, there were several concerns. Reboots of classic franchises often face a difficult balancing act, honoring the original material without becoming trapped by nostalgia. Many modern adaptations either rely too heavily on fan service or stray so far from their origins that they lose the qualities that made them popular in the first place. As a result, there was understandable skepticism about whether Masters of the Universe 2026 could strike the right balance. The challenge was not only to satisfy longtime fans who grew up with He-Man and Skeletor but also to engage younger audiences who may have little or no connection to the franchise. Fortunately, the film appears aware of this challenge and makes a genuine effort to appeal to both groups. One of the most encouraging aspects of the movie is its respect for the mythology of Eternia. Rather than treating the source material as outdated or simplistic, the filmmakers approach it with sincerity and ambition. The world feels lived in and expansive, with a history and culture that extend beyond the immediate story. This commitment to world-building helps establish the film as more than a nostalgic exercise. It feels like the beginning of a potentially larger cinematic universe. For fans who have waited decades to see Eternia realized on a grand scale, this attention to detail is likely to be one of the movie's greatest strengths. At the same time, the film demonstrates a willingness to modernize certain elements of the franchise. Characters are given greater emotional depth, motivations are explored in more detail, and the narrative attempts to provide meaningful stakes beyond the traditional battle between hero and villain. Prince Adam's journey, in particular, is presented as more than a simple transformation into He-Man. The film emphasizes themes of responsibility, self-discovery, leadership, and sacrifice, adding emotional weight to the character's development. This approach helps the story resonate with contemporary audiences while remaining faithful to the core identity of the franchise. Visually, the film leaves a strong first impression. The production design, costumes, visual effects, and action sequences immediately convey a sense of ambition. Eternia feels vibrant and expansive, while iconic locations such as Castle Grayskull are presented with the grandeur that fans have long imagined. The action scenes are energetic and well executed, blending fantasy spectacle with modern blockbuster filmmaking techniques. While visual quality alone cannot guarantee a successful movie, it certainly contributes to the feeling that this adaptation was created with significant care and investment. The performances also play an important role in shaping the initial impression. The cast approaches the material with sincerity rather than irony, which proves essential for a story rooted in larger-than-life characters and mythical conflicts. Nicholas Galitzine brings a sense of determination and vulnerability to Prince Adam, helping audiences connect with the character before he assumes the mantle of He-Man. The supporting cast contributes effectively to the film's emotional and narrative foundation, while the portrayal of Skeletor provides the necessary threat and charisma expected from one of fantasy's most iconic villains. However, despite these strengths, the film is not without its challenges. Certain aspects of the story occasionally feel familiar, drawing upon narrative structures commonly found in modern fantasy and superhero films. Some plot developments may be predictable for experienced viewers, and there are moments when the film prioritizes spectacle over deeper character exploration. These issues do not significantly undermine the overall experience, but they prevent the movie from feeling entirely groundbreaking within its genre. The general tone of this review is therefore largely positive, though not without critical consideration. Masters of the Universe, 2026, succeeds in many of the areas that matter most for a franchise revival. It respects its source material, embraces the unique identity of Eternia, and delivers the scale and excitement that fans have wanted for decades. At the same time, it faces some of the common limitations associated with modern blockbuster filmmaking, occasionally relying on familiar storytelling conventions rather than taking greater creative risks. Overall, my first impression is that Masters of the Universe, 2026, represents a significant step forward for the franchise and arguably the most successful live-action adaptation of the property to date. It captures much of the adventure, imagination, and heroic spirit that have defined the series for generations while updating its presentation for contemporary audiences. Whether it ultimately becomes a landmark fantasy film or simply a strong foundation for future installments may depend on how audiences respond in the long term. Nevertheless, as an initial viewing experience, the film delivers an engaging, visually impressive, and emotionally satisfying adventure that demonstrates why the world of Eternia continues to endure in popular culture. Masters of the Universe originated as a highly successful toy line launched by Mattel in 1982. Designed to compete in the rapidly expanding action figure market, the franchise quickly evolved into a multimedia phenomenon. The toys were supported by comic books, animated television series, merchandise, and later video games, creating one of the most recognizable fantasy brands of the 1980s. At the center of the franchise is Prince Adam, heir to the throne of Eternia, who transforms into He-Man through the power of a magical sword and the legendary phrase, "By the power of Grayskull." As He-Man, he becomes the protector of Eternia against the evil Skeletor, a powerful sorcerer determined to conquer Castle Grayskull and seize its ancient secrets. The unique combination of fantasy, science fiction, mythology, and superhero elements helped distinguish Masters of the Universe from other children's franchises of its era. The original animated series, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, 1983 to 1985, became particularly influential. Its memorable characters, imaginative world-building, and moral lessons at the end of each episode contributed to its lasting popularity. Even decades later, He-Man remains one of the most recognizable characters in popular culture. The franchise has undergone several adaptations across different forms of media throughout its history. The most notable live-action adaptation prior to the 2026 reboot was the 1987 film Masters of the Universe, directed by Gary Goddard and starring Dolph Lundgren as He-Man and Frank Langella as Skeletor. Although the film developed a dedicated cult following over time, it struggled commercially and received mixed reviews upon release. Budget limitations prevented the filmmakers from fully exploring Eternia, resulting in much of the story taking place on Earth rather than within the franchise's fantasy setting. Television adaptations have generally been more successful. The original Filmation animated series established the franchise's identity and remains beloved among fans. Later series such as The New Adventures of He-Man, 1990, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, 2002, and Netflix's Masters of the Universe, Revelation, 2021, attempted to reintroduce the characters to new audiences while expanding the mythology. The 2026 film represents the most ambitious live-action adaptation of the property to date. Unlike previous attempts, it benefits from modern visual effects technology, a significantly larger production scale, and decades of accumulated franchise lore that can be incorporated into the story. The cultural impact of Masters of the Universe extends far beyond its origins as a toy line. During the 1980s, He-Man became one of the defining heroes of children's entertainment. His image appeared on toys, lunchboxes, clothing, comic books, and television screens around the world. The franchise helped shape the toy-driven entertainment model that became increasingly common throughout the decade. He-Man's influence can still be seen in contemporary popular culture. References to the character frequently appear in television shows, films, internet memes, and nostalgic retrospectives celebrating 1980s media. The franchise's blend of heroic fantasy and science fiction adventure inspired countless creators and contributed to the broader popularity of fantasy storytelling among younger audiences. Skeletor, meanwhile, has become one of the most iconic villains in entertainment history. His distinctive appearance, memorable personality, and enduring rivalry with He-Man have allowed him to remain relevant long after the franchise's original peak. Together, He-Man and Skeletor represent one of popular culture's most recognizable hero-villain relationships. The enduring popularity of Masters of the Universe demonstrates its ability to transcend generations. Parents who grew up watching the original series now introduce the franchise to their children, helping maintain its relevance more than 4 decades after its debut. Expectations for Masters of the Universe, 2026, were exceptionally high long before its release. The project spent years in development, with numerous script revisions, production changes, and delays creating both anticipation and skepticism among fans. Longtime followers hoped the film would finally provide a definitive live-action representation of Eternia. Advances in visual effects technology created optimism that iconic locations such as Castle Grayskull, Snake Mountain, and the Royal Kingdom of Eternos could be portrayed with a level of detail and grandeur previously impossible in live-action adaptations. Fans also expected a more faithful adaptation of the source material than the 1987 film. Many wanted to see the rich mythology, diverse characters, and epic conflicts that defined the animated series fully realized on screen. There was particular interest in how the movie would portray Prince Adam's transformation into He-Man, Skeletor's quest for power, and the larger struggle for the fate of Eternia. At the same time, audiences expected the film to modernize the franchise for contemporary viewers. Strong character development, emotional storytelling, and cinematic world-building were viewed as essential elements for success. The challenge facing the filmmakers was not only to satisfy longtime fans but also to attract new audiences unfamiliar with the franchise. Ultimately, Masters of the Universe, 2026, entered theaters carrying decades of nostalgia, immense fan expectations, and the responsibility of revitalizing one of fantasy entertainment's most enduring franchises. Whether it could successfully meet those expectations became one of the central questions surrounding its release. At its core, Masters of the Universe, 2026, is a classic hero's journey set against the backdrop of an epic fantasy world where ancient magic, advanced technology, and legendary warriors coexist. The film follows Prince Adam, a young man who discovers that he is destined to become He-Man, the most powerful champion of Eternia. As dark forces threaten the balance of his world, Adam must embrace his true identity and accept responsibilities far greater than he ever imagined. The story begins with a kingdom facing growing instability as evil forces gather strength and seek to seize control of powerful ancient secrets. Eternia, a world filled with mystical energy and long-forgotten legends, stands on the brink of chaos. While many citizens remain unaware of the full scope of the threat, a looming conflict is gradually spreading across the realm, placing both the kingdom and its people in increasing danger. The film's central conflict revolves around the struggle between the forces of good and evil, embodied by the legendary rivalry between He-Man and Skeletor. Skeletor, one of fantasy cinema's most recognizable villains, seeks access to immense power that could allow him to dominate Eternia and reshape the world according to his ambitions. His relentless pursuit of control threatens not only the kingdom itself but also the ancient balance that has protected Eternia for generations. Standing against this threat is Prince Adam, whose journey forms the emotional heart of the narrative. Unlike traditional heroes who begin their stories fully prepared for greatness, Adam initially struggles with uncertainty, self-doubt, and the weight of expectations placed upon him. As events unfold, he is forced to confront difficult choices that challenge his understanding of duty, courage, and leadership. His transformation into He-Man is not merely a physical change but also a personal evolution that requires him to embrace the qualities necessary to become a true protector of his world. The setting plays a crucial role in shaping the story's atmosphere and appeal. Eternia is presented as a vast and visually striking realm where towering castles, mysterious forests, ancient ruins, and advanced civilizations coexist. The world blends traditional fantasy elements such as magic, mythical creatures, and legendary artifacts with futuristic technology and science fiction influences. This unique combination has long been one of the franchise's defining characteristics, and the film fully embraces it to create an immersive environment that feels both familiar and fresh. Among the most important locations is Castle Grayskull, a legendary fortress whose secrets are deeply connected to the fate of Eternia itself. Throughout the film, the castle serves as both a symbol of hope and a source of immense power, making it a focal point in the ongoing struggle between heroes and villains. Other regions of Eternia contribute to the sense of scale and adventure, helping the story feel larger than the immediate conflict at its center. The protagonist's primary objective is to prevent Skeletor from obtaining the power necessary to conquer Eternia. However, this goal evolves into something much more personal as Adam learns about his heritage, his responsibilities, and the sacrifices required to protect those he cares about. Along the way, he must earn the trust of allies, overcome dangerous obstacles, and confront enemies who test both his physical strength and emotional resilience. Another important objective involves Adam's quest for self-discovery. Throughout much of the film, he struggles to reconcile his ordinary identity with the extraordinary destiny awaiting him. This internal conflict adds depth to the narrative, transforming the story from a simple battle between heroes and villains into a more meaningful exploration of identity, responsibility, and personal growth. The challenges he faces are not limited to external threats. Many of the most significant obstacles arise from his own fears and uncertainties. Supporting characters also play vital roles in helping Adam achieve his goals. Loyal companions, experienced mentors, and courageous warriors provide guidance, support, and friendship during his journey. Their contributions help emphasize themes of teamwork, loyalty, and sacrifice, reinforcing the idea that even the greatest heroes cannot succeed alone. At the same time, Skeletor commands a formidable group of followers whose actions continually raise the stakes and create new challenges for the protagonists. One of the film's greatest strengths is its ability to combine large-scale action with personal storytelling. While the narrative features epic battles, magical confrontations, and spectacular visual sequences, it never loses sight of the emotional journey at its core. The audience is encouraged to invest not only in the fate of Eternia but also in the personal growth of the characters who inhabit it. Without revealing major plot developments, it is fair to say that Masters of the Universe, 2026, follows a familiar yet effective fantasy structure. It explores timeless themes such as heroism, destiny, courage, friendship, and the struggle between light and darkness. However, it also seeks to modernize these concepts through deeper character development and a more emotionally grounded narrative. The result is a story that feels accessible to newcomers while still honoring the mythology that longtime fans have cherished for decades. Overall, the film presents an engaging and ambitious adventure that serves as both an introduction to the world of Eternia and a celebration of the franchise's enduring legacy. Its core premise, compelling central conflict, imaginative setting, and clearly defined protagonist objectives provide a strong foundation for a fantasy epic that aims to entertain audiences while laying the groundwork for future stories within the Masters of the universe. The first act of Masters of the Universe, 2026, serves as the foundation upon which the entire story is built. It introduces audiences to the vast and visually impressive world of Eternia while simultaneously establishing the film's central characters, themes, and conflicts. As with many epic fantasy adventures, the opening act focuses on world building and character development, ensuring that viewers understand what is at stake before the larger conflict unfolds. The filmmakers devote considerable attention to immersing audiences in the mythology of the franchise, creating a strong sense of place and purpose that drives the narrative forward. One of the most important achievements of Act I is its introduction of Eternia itself. The film presents the kingdom as a vibrant and expansive realm where magic and advanced technology coexist. Towering castles, ancient ruins, mystical landscapes, and futuristic structures combine to create a setting that feels unique within the fantasy genre. Rather than overwhelming audiences with excessive exposition, the movie gradually reveals information about the world through character interactions, visual storytelling, and carefully placed details. This approach allows both longtime fans and newcomers to become familiar with Eternia's culture, history, and political tensions without slowing the pace of the narrative. The kingdom is portrayed as a land standing at a crossroads. While peace still exists on the surface, there are growing signs that darker forces are gathering strength. Rumors of ancient powers, mysterious attacks, and political instability hint at dangers that extend far beyond the concerns of ordinary citizens. These early indications create an atmosphere of uncertainty that foreshadows the larger conflict to come. The film effectively uses its setting not only as a backdrop for the story but also as an active component of the narrative, emphasizing that the fate of the entire world will eventually depend on the actions of its heroes. At the center of the story is Prince Adam, whose character setup forms the emotional core of the first act. Unlike traditional fantasy heroes who immediately embrace their destinies, Adam is introduced as a young man struggling to define his place within a world that expects greatness from him. Although he possesses courage and a strong moral compass, he often appears uncertain about his abilities and responsibilities. This portrayal helps humanize the character, making him relatable to audiences despite the extraordinary circumstances surrounding him. The film spends significant time exploring Adam's relationships with those closest to him. His interactions with family members, mentors, and trusted allies provide valuable insight into his personality while establishing the emotional stakes that will later influence his decisions. These relationships also reveal the expectations placed upon him as a prince and future leader. Throughout the first act, Adam's internal conflict becomes increasingly apparent. He desires freedom and self-determination but cannot escape the responsibilities associated with his heritage. This tension creates a compelling foundation for the character's eventual transformation into He-Man. Supporting characters are introduced with enough depth to make them feel important to the story rather than simply serving as background figures. Trusted allies offer guidance and encouragement, while experienced warriors and advisors provide different perspectives on the challenges facing Eternia. These characters help flesh out the world while also contributing to Adam's personal growth. Their presence reinforces one of the film's central themes: true heroism often requires cooperation, trust, and sacrifice rather than individual strength alone. The antagonist's influence is also established during the opening act, even if his full threat has not yet emerged. Skeletor's presence looms over the narrative from the beginning, creating a sense of danger that steadily grows throughout the story. Through reports, rumors, and glimpses of his activities, audiences learn that powerful forces are moving behind the scenes. The film wisely avoids revealing every detail immediately, allowing mystery and anticipation to build naturally. This approach makes Skeletor's eventual actions feel more impactful because viewers have already been conditioned to view him as a significant threat. The inciting incident arrives when a series of events disrupts the relative stability of Eternia and forces Adam to confront realities he can no longer ignore. Without revealing specific plot details, this pivotal moment dramatically alters the direction of the story and pushes the protagonist onto a path from which there is no return. The incident exposes hidden truths, reveals the scale of the looming danger, and demonstrates that the kingdom's future may depend on Adam's willingness to embrace a destiny he has long struggled to accept. This turning point serves multiple narrative functions. First, it provides the immediate motivation necessary to launch the main plot. Second, it deepens the central conflict by making the threat personal rather than purely political or military. Finally, it challenges Adam to make choices that will define his character moving forward. The inciting incident effectively transforms the story from a tale of uncertainty and potential into one of action and responsibility. From a structural perspective, Act I follows many conventions of the classic hero's journey while incorporating modern storytelling techniques. The audience is introduced to the ordinary world, the hero's initial limitations, the forces of opposition, and the event that compels the protagonist to embark on an extraordinary adventure. However, the film also places considerable emphasis on emotional realism and character psychology, ensuring that Adam's decisions feel motivated by personal experiences rather than narrative necessity. The pacing of the first act is generally effective, balancing exposition, character development, and action in a way that maintains audience engagement. While some scenes are dedicated to explaining the mythology of Eternia, these moments are typically integrated into the story rather than presented as lengthy information dumps. As a result, the narrative remains accessible to newcomers while still rewarding longtime fans with references and details connected to the franchise's history. Ultimately, Act I succeeds in establishing the essential components required for a compelling fantasy epic. It introduces a richly imagined world, develops a relatable and sympathetic protagonist, presents a credible threat, and delivers an inciting incident that launches the central adventure. By the end of the first act, audiences understand what is at stake, who the major players are, and why the upcoming conflict matters. Most importantly, the foundation has been laid for Prince Adam's transformation into the legendary hero He-Man, setting the stage for the larger battles and personal challenges that define the remainder of the film. The second act of Masters of the Universe, 2026, serves as the heart of the narrative, significantly expanding the scope of the story while deepening both the characters and the mythology of Eternia. After the first act establishes the world, introduces the central conflict, and launches Prince Adam on his journey, Act II focuses on the challenges he faces as he begins to understand the true weight of his destiny. This section of the film balances action, emotional growth, and exploration, gradually raising the stakes and preparing audiences for the climactic confrontations that await in the final act. One of the most important functions of Act II is the continued development of Prince Adam as a protagonist. While the first act introduces him as someone uncertain about his role in the world, the second act places him in situations that force him to confront his fears, weaknesses, and responsibilities. Rather than immediately mastering his newfound abilities or embracing his heroic identity without hesitation, Adam undergoes a gradual process of growth. He makes mistakes, struggles with self-doubt, and questions whether he is truly capable of becoming the champion that Eternia needs. This approach helps make his journey more relatable and emotionally engaging. Audiences witness not only his physical transformation but also his psychological and emotional evolution. The challenges he faces are not limited to battles against external enemies. Many of his greatest struggles come from within. He must learn to trust himself, accept responsibility for others, and understand that true leadership often requires sacrifice. These lessons form the emotional backbone of the second act and provide meaningful depth to what could otherwise be a straightforward fantasy adventure. The supporting cast also receives significant development during this portion of the film. Allies who initially appeared as secondary figures become more fully realized characters with their own motivations, fears, and personal goals. Relationships deepen as the characters spend more time together, creating stronger emotional connections and making the eventual outcomes of the story more impactful. Mentors offer guidance while also revealing vulnerabilities of their own, helping to demonstrate that even experienced heroes face uncertainty and difficult choices. Particularly noteworthy is the way the film develops the bond between Adam and his closest companions. Trust becomes an increasingly important theme as the group encounters obstacles that test their loyalty and commitment to one another. Moments of friendship, disagreement, and mutual support help humanize the characters and prevent the story from becoming solely focused on action and spectacle. These interactions contribute to the film's broader message that heroism is rarely achieved alone. As character development progresses, the narrative simultaneously introduces a series of escalating conflicts that steadily increase tension throughout the story. Skeletor's plans become more aggressive and dangerous, transforming him from a distant threat into an active force whose actions directly impact the heroes and the kingdom. His pursuit of power intensifies, and the consequences of his ambitions become increasingly visible across Eternia. The conflict is no longer confined to isolated incidents or warnings of future danger. Entire regions begin to feel the effects of the growing struggle, and the heroes are forced to respond to crises that reveal the true scale of the threat. Each confrontation raises the stakes, demonstrating that failure could have catastrophic consequences not only for the protagonists but for the entire world. This progression creates a sense of urgency that drives the narrative forward while keeping audiences invested in the outcome. The film also introduces moral and emotional conflicts that complement the larger battle between good and evil. Characters are frequently forced to make difficult decisions, balancing personal desires against their responsibilities to others. These dilemmas add complexity to the story by ensuring that the conflict is not simply physical but also ideological and emotional. Questions of loyalty, destiny, trust, and sacrifice become increasingly important as the narrative unfolds. Skeletor's role is particularly effective during this stage of the film. Rather than functioning solely as a source of physical danger, he represents a powerful ideological opposition to everything the heroes stand for. His actions challenge the values of courage, hope, and selflessness that define the protagonists, creating a conflict that operates on multiple levels. This dynamic helps elevate the narrative beyond a simple battle between opposing forces. Another major strength of Act 2 is its expansion of the world building introduced in the opening act. Having established the basic structure of Eternia, the film now broadens its scope by exploring new locations, cultures, and aspects of the planet's history. Audiences are given a deeper understanding of the world's mythology, including ancient legends, forgotten conflicts, and powerful artifacts that shape the current struggle. This expansion significantly enriches the narrative by making Eternia feel like a living, breathing world rather than merely a setting for the plot. Different regions possess unique visual identities, traditions, and challenges, contributing to the sense that the heroes are traveling through a vast and diverse realm. The film's production design and visual effects play a crucial role in bringing these locations to life, creating environments that feel distinct while remaining connected to the franchise's established aesthetic. Castle Grayskull becomes increasingly important during this stage of the story. While its significance is introduced earlier, Act 2 delves more deeply into its history, symbolism, and connection to the larger mythology of Eternia. The castle functions as more than a simple location, it serves as a representation of the forces that the heroes are fighting to protect. Its mysteries and secrets add layers of intrigue to the narrative, encouraging audiences to become more invested in the world and its lore. The expansion of the mythology also helps explain the origins of key characters, powers, and conflicts. Ancient prophecies, legendary battles, and long-forgotten truths gradually come to light, providing context for current events while enriching the story's thematic depth. These revelations are carefully integrated into the narrative, ensuring that they enhance rather than overwhelm the central plot. The pacing of Act 2 is particularly important because it must balance exposition, character development, action sequences, and world building without losing momentum. For the most part, the film succeeds in maintaining this balance. Action scenes are strategically placed throughout the narrative, providing excitement while simultaneously advancing character arcs and plot developments. Quiet moments of reflection allow the audience to connect with the characters on a deeper level, preventing the spectacle from overshadowing the emotional core of the story. By the conclusion of Act 2, the situation facing the heroes has become dramatically more serious than it was at the beginning of the film. The protagonist has grown considerably but still faces significant challenges. The world has expanded both physically and emotionally, revealing greater dangers and deeper mysteries than initially imagined. Most importantly, the central conflict has escalated to a point where a decisive confrontation becomes inevitable. Overall, Act 2 serves as the strongest and most substantial section of Masters of the Universe, 2026. It successfully develops the characters, intensifies the conflict, and broadens the mythology of Eternia in ways that enhance both the narrative and the emotional stakes. Through its combination of personal growth, escalating danger, and immersive world building, the second act transforms the film from a simple adventure into a fully realized fantasy epic, setting the stage for the dramatic events of the final act. The third act of Masters of the Universe, 2026, delivers the epic spectacle and emotional culmination that the previous sections of the film carefully build toward. After spending much of the narrative establishing the mythology of Eternia, developing its characters, and escalating the threat posed by Skeletor, the final act brings these elements together in a dramatic and high-stakes conclusion. It is here that the film fully embraces its identity as a fantasy blockbuster, presenting large-scale battles, powerful emotional moments, and long-awaited confrontations that determine the fate of both the characters and the world they inhabit. The climactic confrontation serves as the centerpiece of the third act. By this point in the story, the conflict between He-Man and Skeletor has evolved beyond a simple struggle for power. It has become a battle between opposing ideals, with each character representing fundamentally different visions for the future of Eternia. Skeletor seeks domination and control through the pursuit of ancient power, while He-Man fights to preserve freedom, hope, and the balance that has protected the kingdom for generations. Without revealing specific plot twists or major spoilers, the final battle is appropriately grand in scale. The filmmakers take full advantage of the world they have spent the previous acts constructing, using iconic locations, visually stunning environments, and large-scale action sequences to create a sense of epic importance. The conflict extends beyond a single duel, involving multiple characters and storylines that converge during the climax. Allies are called upon to make crucial contributions, and supporting characters are given opportunities to demonstrate their courage and loyalty, ensuring that the outcome does not depend solely on the protagonist. One of the strengths of the climactic confrontation is the way it balances spectacle with character-driven storytelling. While the action sequences are visually impressive and filled with dramatic moments, the emotional stakes remain at the forefront. The audience is not simply watching two powerful opponents fight, they are witnessing the culmination of personal journeys, sacrifices, and relationships that have been developed throughout the film. This emotional investment makes the climax more impactful than it would be if it relied solely on visual effects or action choreography. Prince Adam's transformation into a fully realized hero reaches its peak during this stage of the narrative. Throughout the film, he has struggled with questions of identity, responsibility, and self-worth. The climax forces him to confront these issues directly, requiring him to make choices that demonstrate how much he has grown since the beginning of the story. His actions reflect the lessons he has learned and the values he has embraced, providing a satisfying conclusion to his character arc. Skeletor also benefits from the film's emphasis on character-focused storytelling. Rather than serving merely as an obstacle to be defeated, he remains an active and compelling presence throughout the climax. His motivations, ambitions, and determination contribute to the tension of the final confrontation, making him feel like a worthy adversary rather than a one-dimensional villain. The dynamic between hero and villain is therefore strengthened by the personal and ideological conflicts that underpin their rivalry. As the battle reaches its conclusion, the film transitions into its resolution phase. This portion of the third act focuses on the consequences of the characters' actions and the impact of the conflict on Eternia as a whole. The immediate threat is addressed, But the story also takes time to examine how the journey has changed the individuals involved. Relationships that have been tested throughout the narrative find closure, and lingering questions are answered in a manner that feels both satisfying and emotionally resonant. The resolution avoids feeling rushed by allowing important character moments to breathe. Instead of immediately ending after the climax, the film dedicates time to showing how the events of the story have affected the kingdom, its people, and the central characters. This approach helps reinforce the significance of the journey and ensures that the audience can fully appreciate the consequences of the hero's sacrifices and victories. A particularly effective aspect of the resolution is its emphasis on growth and transformation. By the end of the film, many of the principal characters have evolved in meaningful ways. Prince Adam is no longer the uncertain young man introduced in the opening act. His experiences have shaped him into a more confident and capable leader, someone worthy of the title and responsibilities associated with He-Man. Similarly, supporting characters emerge from the conflict with new perspectives and strengthened bonds, creating a sense that the journey has had lasting significance. The emotional payoff of the third act is one of its greatest achievements. Successful fantasy stories often resonate because they connect epic events to deeply personal experiences, and Masters of the Universe, 2026, largely succeeds in this regard. The film's emotional impact stems not only from the outcome of the conflict but also from the relationships, sacrifices, and personal growth that accompany it. Themes of courage, destiny, friendship, loyalty, and sacrifice receive meaningful resolution during the final act. Characters are rewarded for their perseverance, while difficult choices carry genuine consequences. These emotional elements ensure that the climax feels earned rather than simply spectacular. The audience is encouraged to reflect on how far the characters have come and what they have overcome to reach this point. The film also leaves room for future storytelling without undermining the sense of closure provided by the ending. Certain elements of the mythology remain open for exploration, and hints of future adventures may be present. However, the primary narrative reaches a satisfying conclusion, allowing the film to function effectively as both a standalone story and a potential foundation for future installments. From a structural perspective, Act 3 successfully fulfills the promises established in the earlier portions of the narrative. The central conflict reaches a decisive conclusion, character arcs receive appropriate resolution, and the themes explored throughout the film are brought together in a cohesive and emotionally satisfying manner. While some viewers may find certain aspects predictable due to the familiar conventions of the fantasy genre, the execution remains strong enough to maintain audience engagement and deliver a rewarding finale. Ultimately, the third act demonstrates the film's greatest strengths, its commitment to character-driven storytelling, its respect for the mythology of the franchise, and its ability to combine emotional depth with large-scale spectacle. The climactic confrontation provides the excitement expected from a modern fantasy blockbuster, while the resolution and emotional payoff ensure that the story leaves a lasting impression. By bringing together action, character growth, and thematic resonance, Act 3 completes Prince Adam's journey in a manner that feels both heroic and meaningful, offering a fitting conclusion to Masters of the Universe, 2026. Masters of the Universe, 2026, does not attempt to radically reinvent the fantasy genre, but it does succeed in reimagining a classic franchise for modern audiences. Its foundation is rooted in familiar hero's journey structure, chosen one mythology, and good versus evil conflict. However, its originality lies in how it modernizes Eternia's world-building, deepens emotional character arcs, and blends fantasy with science fantasy elements in a visually contemporary way. While not groundbreaking in narrative structure, it feels fresh enough due to its execution and updated tone. The story is generally clear and easy to follow, even with its expansive mythology and large ensemble cast. The film does a strong job of introducing Eternia, its rules, and its central conflict without overwhelming the audience with exposition. Character motivations are mostly well-defined, especially for Prince Adam and Skeletor. At times, the density of lore and world-building can briefly challenge comprehension for casual viewers, but overall the narrative remains accessible and coherent. The pacing is steady and well-structured across the three acts. Act I focuses on setup and world building, Act 2 expands the conflict and deepens character arcs, and Act 3 delivers a satisfying climax. The film takes its time in the middle section, which may feel slightly slow for viewers expecting non-stop action, but this slower pacing is necessary for emotional development and mythology expansion. Action sequences are well distributed and effectively used to maintain momentum. The film maintains strong engagement through its combination of spectacle, character development, and world building. The visual design of Eternia, along with the evolving conflict between He-Man and Skeletor, keeps the story consistently interesting. The stakes gradually escalate in a way that encourages investment in the outcome. Even during exposition-heavy moments, the film generally retains viewer interest due to its strong atmosphere and sense of scale. Emotional investment is one of the film's stronger qualities. Prince Adam's journey from uncertainty to responsibility forms a relatable emotional core. Supporting relationships, particularly themes of loyalty, mentorship, and sacrifice, help ground the fantasy elements in human emotion. While some emotional beats follow familiar genre patterns, they are executed with sincerity and enough character depth to remain impactful. Yes, the story is compelling, particularly for fans of fantasy and adventure genres. While it follows a familiar heroic structure, the combination of strong world building, character growth, and escalating stakes creates a narrative that consistently holds interest. The emotional journey of Prince Adam adds depth, ensuring the film is not just about external battles but also internal transformation. Yes, the story remains coherent throughout. Despite the complexity of its mythology and ensemble cast, the film maintains a clear narrative direction. Each act logically builds upon the previous one, and character motivations remain understandable. Transitions between exposition, action, and emotional moments are handled effectively, helping preserve narrative clarity. There are no major plot holes that significantly disrupt the story. However, there are a few minor conveniences typical of fantasy blockbusters, such as rapid access to certain information, slightly simplified explanations of ancient lore, or convenient timing in character arrivals during key moments. These issues do not break immersion but may be noticeable to more detail-oriented viewers. Yes, the ending is largely satisfying. The final confrontation delivers on the build-up established throughout the film, and character arcs receive meaningful closure. Prince Adam's transformation feels earned, and the resolution of the central conflict provides emotional and narrative payoff. While the film leaves room for future installments, it still offers a complete and fulfilling conclusion to the main story, avoiding the feeling of being overly dependent on a sequel. The dialogue is generally natural within the heightened fantasy context of Eternia. Characters speak in a tone that blends modern accessibility with mythic seriousness, avoiding overly archaic phrasing while still maintaining an epic feel. Some exposition-heavy lines are noticeable, particularly in early world-building scenes, but they are mostly integrated into character interactions rather than delivered as pure informational dumps. Each major character is given a distinct voice. Prince Adam's dialogue reflects uncertainty and emotional vulnerability early on, gradually shifting toward confidence and authority as he embraces his destiny. Skeletor's speech is more theatrical and commanding, emphasizing his ideological opposition to the heroes. Supporting characters also maintain recognizable tones, though a few secondary roles occasionally blend together due to limited dialogue differentiation. Humor is used sparingly but effectively. Rather than relying on constant comedic relief, the screenplay incorporates light moments of wit and character-based humor to break tension. These moments feel organic and are usually tied to character relationships rather than forced jokes, helping maintain tonal balance within the film's serious fantasy framework. While the dialogue is competent and functional, only a handful of lines stand out as truly memorable. Key speeches related to destiny, heroism, and the power of Eternia carry emotional weight, but the screenplay does not consistently aim for iconic one-liners. Skeletor, in particular, benefits from more striking dialogue moments than other characters, reinforcing his presence as the primary antagonist. Character behavior remains largely consistent throughout the film. Prince Adam's internal conflict is maintained across all 3 acts, and his decisions align with his emotional arc. Skeletor remains firmly committed to his goals, avoiding unnecessary inconsistency in motivation or personality. Supporting characters also behave in ways that are generally aligned with their established traits, contributing to narrative stability. The screenplay makes a clear effort to add emotional depth to its characters, particularly through Prince Adam's journey of self-discovery. Instead of presenting him as an instantly capable hero, the script emphasizes doubt, fear, and responsibility. Secondary characters receive varying levels of depth. Some are well developed with meaningful arcs, while others function primarily as narrative support. Character motivations are clear and easy to understand. Adam's motivation centers on accepting his destiny and protecting Eternia. Skeletor is driven by ambition and the desire for absolute power. Supporting characters are motivated by loyalty, duty, and survival. While motivations are straightforward, they are effective in maintaining narrative clarity and emotional engagement. Character growth is one of the screenplay's stronger elements. Prince Adam undergoes the most significant transformation, evolving from uncertainty to leadership and heroism. His arc is structured in a way that feels gradual and earned. Some supporting characters experience smaller but meaningful changes, particularly in their understanding of trust and sacrifice. Heroism is portrayed not as innate strength but as a choice shaped by responsibility and sacrifice. The script repeatedly reinforces the idea that true heroism requires emotional courage as much as physical power. Destiny plays a central role in Prince Adam's journey. The screenplay explores whether destiny is something imposed or something accepted through personal growth and decision-making. Power is presented as both a gift and a danger. Through Skeletor's pursuit and Adam's transformation, the script contrasts responsible use of power with destructive ambition. Sacrifice appears frequently, particularly in moments where characters must choose between personal desires and the greater good. These moments help elevate emotional stakes. The importance of trust and companionship is emphasized throughout the narrative. Adam's allies play a crucial role in his development, reinforcing that heroism is not achieved alone. While the film maintains a clear moral divide, it adds subtle complexity by exploring motivations behind both sides. However, the core structure remains rooted in a classic good versus evil conflict. The screenplay contains several standout sequences, particularly those involving Prince Adam's transformation moments, early confrontations with Skeletor's forces, and emotionally charged dialogue scenes between key characters. These moments effectively combine spectacle with emotional resonance. Certain scenes stand out due to their visual and emotional impact, especially moments involving the discovery of Eternia's ancient secrets, bonding scenes between allies, and key turning points in Adam's internal journey. Despite the complexity of the franchise's mythology, the screenplay handles exposition relatively well. Information about Eternia, its history, and its powers is gradually revealed through character interaction and visual storytelling rather than heavy-handed explanation, making the world easier to absorb. One of the screenplay's main weaknesses is its predictability. The story follows a familiar hero's journey structure, and many plot developments can be anticipated by experienced viewers of fantasy and superhero films. While execution is strong, narrative surprises are limited. Although generally well-managed, there are moments where exposition becomes slightly dense, particularly in early world-building sequences. Some explanations of lore and ancient history may feel longer than necessary for casual audiences. The screenplay occasionally struggles with tonal balance. While it mostly maintains a consistent fantasy adventure tone, there are brief shifts between serious mythological storytelling and lighter character moments that may feel slightly uneven. However, these inconsistencies do not significantly disrupt the overall experience. Prince Adam, also known as He-Man, stands at the emotional and narrative center of Masters of the Universe, 2026. His journey is designed as a classic but carefully modernized hero's arc, transforming him from an uncertain royal heir into a fully realized champion of Eternia. Rather than presenting him as an inherently perfect or destined hero from the outset, the screenplay builds his character through doubt, failure, learning, and gradual self-acceptance. This layered approach gives weight to his eventual transformation and ensures that his role as He-Man feels earned rather than predetermined. Prince Adam's arc follows a structured evolution from self-doubt to self-actualization. In the beginning, he is portrayed as someone who feels disconnected from the expectations placed upon him. Although he understands his royal responsibilities, he does not fully believe he is capable of living up to them. This insecurity forms the foundation of his internal struggle and drives much of his early behavior. As the story progresses, Adam is confronted with increasingly dangerous situations that force him to act despite his uncertainty. Each challenge pushes him closer to accepting the truth about his identity and potential. The turning point of his arc occurs when he begins to realize that heroism is not about perfection or fearlessness, but about choosing to act in spite of fear. By the final act, this realization allows him to fully embrace his role as He-Man, completing a transformation that feels gradual, structured, and emotionally grounded. Adam's internal conflict is one of the strongest aspects of his characterization. He is torn between two identities, the ordinary young man who questions his worth and the destined hero who is expected to save an entire world. This duality creates constant tension within him, especially when external pressures demand decisive action. A key element of his internal struggle is the fear of failure. Adam is not afraid of responsibility itself, but of the consequences that might come from not being good enough. This fear often causes hesitation, which in turn puts additional pressure on him as events escalate. The screenplay effectively uses this internal conflict to mirror the external threats facing Eternia, making his personal journey inseparable from the fate of the world. Over time, Adam learns that leadership is not defined by certainty, but by willingness to act under uncertainty. This shift in mindset marks a crucial turning point in his emotional development. Adam's leadership qualities are not immediately apparent at the beginning of the film. Instead, they emerge gradually as he is placed in situations that require decision-making, empathy, and courage. Initially, he tends to follow rather than lead, relying on more experienced characters for guidance. However, as the narrative progresses, Adam begins to demonstrate key leadership traits. Empathy, he consistently shows concern for others, even when he is struggling himself. Responsibility, he gradually accepts that his actions have consequences not just for himself, but for entire communities. Adaptability, he learns to respond to rapidly changing situations rather than freezing under pressure. Inspiration, by the final act, other characters begin to look to him for direction, signaling his evolution into a true leader. By the end of the film, Adam's leadership is no longer questioned. It is recognized by both allies and the narrative itself as something he has earned through experience rather than inherited through title. Emotionally, Prince Adam undergoes a significant transformation throughout the film. At the start, he is cautious, unsure, and internally conflicted. He often suppresses his emotions in favor of fulfilling what he believes are his obligations. However, this emotional restraint gradually breaks down as he forms deeper connections with others and faces increasingly personal stakes. One of the key emotional shifts occurs when Adam begins to accept vulnerability as a strength rather than a weakness. This allows him to form stronger bonds with his allies and fully engage with his responsibilities. The emotional weight of his journey is reinforced by moments of loss, doubt, encouragement, and self-discovery, all of which contribute to his growth. By the end of the film, Adam is no longer defined by hesitation or fear. Instead, he demonstrates emotional maturity, confidence, and a clear understanding of his role within the larger world of Eternia. Skeletor stands at the center of Masters of the Universe, 2026, as a villain driven by an overwhelming desire for absolute power and dominion over Eternia. Rather than existing as an evil force for its own sake, his ambitions are rooted in an obsession with controlling the planet's greatest mystical forces and reshaping the world according to his own vision. His relentless pursuit of power creates a compelling conflict with He-Man, making every confrontation feel meaningful because the stakes extend far beyond a simple battle between good and evil. Throughout the film, Skeletor maintains a commanding screen presence that immediately captures attention whenever he appears. His intimidating appearance, confident demeanor, and calculated dialogue establish him as a constant source of tension. Even in scenes where he is not directly involved in combat, his influence is felt through his followers and the fear he inspires, reinforcing the idea that he is always several steps ahead of his enemies. The threat level associated with Skeletor is consistently high. He possesses immense magical abilities, strategic intelligence, and the willingness to sacrifice anything necessary to achieve his objectives. Unlike villains who rely solely on brute force, Skeletor combines supernatural power with careful planning, making him a dangerous adversary capable of challenging both He-Man's physical strength and his resolve. His actions place not only individual heroes at risk but the fate of Eternia itself. From a character standpoint, Skeletor demonstrates more complexity than many classic fantasy villains. While he remains unmistakably ruthless and power-hungry, the film hints at deeper layers behind his obsession with conquest, allowing audiences to see him as more than a one-dimensional embodiment of evil. These nuances help elevate his role and make his rivalry with the protagonist feel more emotionally engaging. Skeletor is undoubtedly one of the film's most memorable characters. His iconic design, commanding personality, and central role in the story ensure that he leaves a lasting impression long after the credits roll. He is also genuinely intimidating, not only because of his extraordinary powers but because of his calm confidence and unpredictable nature, which create a constant sense of danger. Perhaps most importantly, the film avoids reducing Skeletor to a cartoonish caricature. While it respects the character's larger-than-life origins and iconic legacy, it presents him with enough seriousness and dramatic weight to fit the tone of a modern fantasy adventure. This balanced portrayal allows Skeletor to remain faithful to the beloved source material while evolving into a formidable cinematic antagonist capable of carrying the emotional and narrative stakes of Masters of the Universe, 2026. Teela serves as one of the film's most important supporting characters, contributing far more than combat skills or battlefield support. She plays a vital role in advancing the narrative by challenging the protagonist's decisions, strengthening the group's unity, and providing a grounded perspective during moments of uncertainty. Her presence helps balance the story's larger-than-life fantasy elements with genuine emotional stakes. As the story unfolds, Teela experiences noticeable character growth, evolving from a determined warrior into a leader capable of making difficult choices for the greater good. Her journey reflects themes of loyalty, courage, and self-discovery, making her one of the most engaging characters outside the central hero. Man-at-Arms fulfills the classic mentor role with sincerity and emotional depth. Rather than acting solely as a military strategist or experienced warrior, he provides guidance, discipline, and unwavering support to those around him, particularly He-Man and Teela. His wisdom is rooted in years of experience, allowing him to offer practical advice during moments of conflict and uncertainty. Beyond his strategic importance, Man-at-Arms carries considerable emotional significance within the story. His protective nature, strong moral values, and willingness to sacrifice for Eternia reinforce the film's themes of responsibility, family, and leadership, making him one of the narrative's emotional anchors. The sorceress represents the spiritual and mythological heart of Masters of the Universe, 2026. Closely connected to Eternia's ancient magic and its sacred traditions, she provides the story with a sense of history and mystical grandeur. Her presence reinforces the importance of destiny, balance, and the eternal struggle between light and darkness. As a source of wisdom and guidance, she helps shape the hero's understanding of their responsibilities without overshadowing their individual choices. Her calm authority and deep knowledge of Eternia's secrets add both credibility and emotional weight to the film's fantasy world. Evelyn is portrayed as far more than a loyal follower of Skeletor, bringing intelligence, ambition, and strategic insight to the forces of darkness. Her relationship with the main antagonist is built on mutual benefit rather than unquestioning devotion, creating subtle tension that adds depth to their alliance. She frequently acts as Skeletor's most capable advisor while pursuing goals that reflect her own ambitions. This independent agency prevents her from becoming a one-dimensional henchwoman, allowing her to influence events through manipulation, calculated decision-making, and personal initiative. As a result, Evelyn emerges as a compelling supporting antagonist whose motivations extend beyond simply serving the film's primary villain. The lead performance in Masters of the Universe, 2026, carries the responsibility of bringing one of fantasy's most recognizable heroes to life, and the result is both physically commanding and emotionally engaging. Rather than portraying He-Man as an invincible warrior with limited emotional depth, the performance emphasizes the character's internal struggles, sense of duty, and evolving confidence. This approach allows the protagonist to feel more relatable while preserving the heroic qualities that have defined the character for decades. The emotional range displayed throughout the film is one of the performance's strongest aspects. The actor convincingly transitions between moments of determination, vulnerability, compassion, and righteous anger, ensuring that the character remains emotionally grounded even amid large-scale fantasy conflicts. Whether facing personal sacrifice or confronting overwhelming odds, the emotional responses feel sincere and appropriately restrained, adding credibility to the hero's journey. From a physical standpoint, the commitment is evident in every action sequence. The demanding fight choreography, athletic movement, and commanding posture reinforce the image of a legendary warrior capable of protecting Eternia. Rather than relying solely on visual effects, the performance demonstrates discipline and presence during combat, making the action feel believable and immersive. This physical dedication strengthens the authenticity of the character and enhances the film's epic scale. Screen presence is another defining strength of the lead performance. The actor consistently commands attention during both dialogue-driven scenes and large-scale battles, balancing confidence with humility in a way that suits the character's heroic identity. Even when sharing scenes with strong supporting characters or powerful antagonists, the protagonist remains the emotional and narrative focal point of the story. Character chemistry further elevates the performance. The interactions with Teela, Man-at-Arms, the Sorceress, and even Skeletor feel natural and purposeful, helping to establish believable relationships that contribute to the emotional stakes of the film. The camaraderie among allies and the tension with enemies develop organically, making the world of Eternia feel populated by characters who genuinely influence one another. The supporting cast in Masters of the Universe, 2026, provides a solid foundation for the film, ensuring that the story never relies solely on its central hero. Each major character contributes meaningfully to the narrative, whether by advancing the plot, enriching the mythology of Eternia, or strengthening the emotional stakes. Their performances remain consistent throughout the film, maintaining the tone of an epic fantasy adventure while giving each character a distinct personality and purpose. This consistency helps create a believable ensemble where every member feels like an important part of the larger conflict rather than simply existing to support the protagonist. The overall impact of the supporting cast is significant, particularly during pivotal moments involving strategy, sacrifice, and emotional revelation. Characters such as Teela, Man-at-Arms, the Sorceress, and Evelyn each receive opportunities to influence the story in meaningful ways, preventing them from becoming one-dimensional companions or villains. Several of the film's most memorable scenes arise from their interactions, including emotionally charged conversations, dramatic confrontations, and large-scale battle sequences that highlight their individual strengths and relationships with the protagonist. These moments add depth to the narrative and help make the world of Eternia feel fully realized. Among the supporting cast, Skeletor emerges as the performance that steals the show. The character's commanding screen presence, calculated menace, and magnetic personality make every appearance compelling. The performance strikes an effective balance between honoring the iconic traits fans expect and presenting the villain with enough dramatic weight to feel genuinely threatening. Whether delivering intimidating dialogue or orchestrating his plans from the shadows, Skeletor consistently captures the audience's attention and serves as one of the film's strongest dramatic forces. There are no major casting misfires that significantly undermine the film, as the principal cast generally fits their respective roles well. However, some secondary supporting characters receive limited screen time, leaving their performances with fewer opportunities to make a lasting impression. As a result, a handful of minor roles may feel underdeveloped rather than poorly acted. This is more a consequence of the film's narrative priorities than of weak performances, and the overall ensemble remains cohesive and effective in supporting the story's epic scope. The direction of Masters of the Universe, 2026, reflects a clear ambition to modernize the beloved franchise while preserving the mythic spirit that made the original property so enduring. The storytelling style balances large-scale fantasy spectacle with character-driven moments, allowing the narrative to develop both its action and emotional core. Rather than rushing from one battle to the next, the film gives its characters room to grow, ensuring that the conflicts carry emotional weight alongside their visual impact. This measured approach helps create a story that feels engaging for longtime fans as well as newcomers. Tone management is handled with notable consistency throughout the film. The director embraces the grandeur of a fantasy epic without allowing the story to become excessively dark or overly lighthearted. Moments of humor are used sparingly to provide relief without disrupting the dramatic momentum, while emotional scenes receive enough attention to resonate with the audience. This balanced tone allows the film to maintain excitement during action sequences while preserving the seriousness of its central conflict between He-Man and Skeletor. One of the director's greatest achievements lies in the film's world building. Eternia is presented as a rich and expansive fantasy realm with its own history, mystical traditions, and political conflicts. From ancient magical locations to imposing fortresses and diverse landscapes, the world feels lived in and believable rather than serving merely as a backdrop for action. The careful attention to visual detail and mythology helps immerse viewers in the setting and strengthens the overall cinematic experience. Character focus remains an important priority despite the film's epic scale. The director ensures that the story is not driven solely by visual spectacle but also by the personal journeys of its heroes and villains. Relationships between He-Man, Teela, Man-at-Arms, the Sorceress, and Skeletor receive meaningful development, giving emotional context to the larger battles. This emphasis on character allows audiences to become invested in the people behind the legendary conflict rather than simply the outcome of the war itself. The film demonstrates a strong understanding of the original Masters of the Universe source material by respecting its iconic mythology, legendary characters, and timeless themes of courage, destiny, and the struggle between good and evil. Instead of relying entirely on nostalgia, the director adapts these familiar elements for a modern audience while preserving the franchise's essential identity. This balance helps the adaptation feel both faithful and contemporary. Overall, the director's vision remains coherent from beginning to end. Every major creative decision, from the visual design and pacing to the character arcs and thematic focus, supports the film's central narrative. The result is a fantasy adventure that feels unified rather than fragmented, allowing its story, performances, and action to complement one another effectively. The cinematography in Masters of the Universe, 2026, plays a crucial role in bringing Eternia to life, transforming its legendary landscapes and mythical conflicts into a visually immersive cinematic experience. Every frame is designed to reinforce the film's epic scale while maintaining a strong emotional connection to its characters. Rather than relying solely on spectacle, the visuals consistently support the narrative, helping audiences understand the emotional stakes, power dynamics, and grandeur of the world through carefully crafted imagery. The camera work is dynamic yet purposeful, adapting its style to suit each scene. Sweeping aerial shots showcase the vast kingdoms and ancient landmarks of Eternia, emphasizing the scale of the adventure, while tighter close-ups capture moments of vulnerability, determination, and personal conflict. During action sequences, the camera remains fluid and controlled, allowing the choreography to remain clear and impactful without becoming visually overwhelming. This thoughtful approach keeps viewers engaged while ensuring that every major confrontation remains easy to follow. Shot composition is consistently impressive, making effective use of depth, symmetry, and environmental detail to reinforce the film's mythological atmosphere. Characters are often framed against towering castles, mystical temples, and dramatic landscapes, visually emphasizing their place within a world much larger than themselves. The compositions also help distinguish moments of triumph, isolation, and confrontation, giving the story additional emotional resonance beyond the dialogue. The color palette effectively separates the opposing forces within the narrative. Heroic locations are presented with vibrant blues, rich greens, and warm golden tones that evoke hope, courage, and ancient nobility, while Skeletor's domains are dominated by darker shades of black, crimson, and deep purple, creating an atmosphere of menace and corruption. These deliberate color choices not only enhance the visual appeal but also reinforce the emotional tone of each scene and the ongoing struggle between light and darkness. Visual symbolism further enriches the storytelling by using recurring imagery to highlight the film's central themes of destiny, power, and sacrifice. Iconic elements such as the Sword of Power, Castle Grayskull, mystical energy, and ancient relics serve as more than simple fantasy props. They represent responsibility, legacy, and the balance between opposing forces. These symbolic visuals strengthen the narrative while remaining faithful to the mythology that defines the franchise. The film delivers numerous memorable visuals, from breathtaking panoramic views of Eternia to dramatic confrontations between He-Man and Skeletor. Several scenes possess the kind of striking imagery that lingers long after the credits, helping the movie establish a strong visual identity within the fantasy genre. The camera consistently enhances the storytelling by directing the audience's attention toward emotional reactions, character relationships, and narrative tension rather than simply showcasing visual effects. Whether highlighting the loneliness of a hero, the intimidation of a villain, or the grandeur of an ancient kingdom, the cinematography serves the story instead of distracting from it. The production design in Masters of the Universe, 2026, is one of the film's defining strengths, creating a fantasy world that feels expansive, immersive, and rich with history. Every environment is carefully crafted to support the mythology of Eternia, blending ancient architecture, mystical elements, and futuristic technology into a cohesive visual identity. Rather than functioning as simple backdrops, the settings actively contribute to the story by reflecting the cultures, conflicts, and legends that shape the world. This attention to environmental storytelling helps establish a believable universe that invites audiences to become fully invested in its history and characters. Eternia is presented as a vibrant and diverse realm filled with majestic landscapes, ancient ruins, fortified cities, and mystical locations. The kingdom feels far larger than the events of the main storyline, suggesting a civilization with centuries of history and countless untold stories. The varied environments prevent the setting from feeling repetitive, while the architectural designs successfully blend fantasy aesthetics with subtle science fiction influences that have always been part of the franchise's identity. Castle Grayskull serves as the visual and spiritual centerpiece of the film. Its imposing architecture, mysterious atmosphere, and intricate interior design reinforce its status as the most sacred location in Eternia. Every detail, from the massive stone structures to the mystical chambers filled with ancient power, emphasizes the castle's importance within the mythology. The production design successfully captures both the grandeur and mystery associated with this iconic landmark, making it feel worthy of its legendary reputation. The villain's strongholds provide a striking visual contrast to the heroic environments. Dark fortresses, corrupted landscapes, and ominous interiors are designed to reflect Skeletor's relentless pursuit of power and domination. The use of jagged architecture, shadow-filled corridors, and supernatural imagery creates an atmosphere of constant danger without relying solely on visual excess. These locations effectively communicate the oppressive nature of the villains while maintaining consistency with the film's overall artistic style. The production design demonstrates a high level of authenticity by remaining faithful to the classic mythology while adapting it for a modern cinematic audience. Familiar locations, symbols, and architectural styles are reimagined with greater realism and detail, allowing longtime fans to recognize iconic elements while giving new audiences a world that feels fully realized. Attention to detail is evident throughout the film. Costumes, weapons, buildings, artifacts, and environmental decorations all contribute to the impression that Eternia has a rich cultural history extending far beyond the events shown on screen. Small visual touches, such as ancient carvings, weathered structures, ceremonial objects, and battlefield remnants, enhance the realism of the setting and reward attentive viewers. Creativity is another standout aspect of the production design. The filmmakers successfully blend medieval fantasy, advanced technology, and magical mythology into a distinctive visual style that separates Masters of the Universe, 2026, from many contemporary fantasy films. This fusion of genres creates a unique aesthetic while remaining true to the franchise's original identity. The sense of scale consistently reinforces the epic nature of the story. Massive castles, towering mountains, sprawling battlefields, and monumental structures communicate the importance of the conflict between He-Man and Skeletor. The environments never feel confined, allowing the world to appear vast enough to support future stories and adventures. The costume and makeup design in Masters of the Universe, 2026, successfully modernizes the franchise's iconic characters while preserving the visual identity that longtime fans associate with Eternia. Rather than recreating the classic animated designs exactly as they appeared decades ago, the film reinterprets them with greater realism, practical functionality, and cinematic detail. The result is a collection of costumes that feel appropriate for a live-action fantasy epic without losing the recognizable features that define each character. One of the production's greatest achievements is its balance between accuracy to the source material and modern filmmaking. Signature colors, armor pieces, weapons, and character silhouettes remain faithful to the original designs, but they are enhanced with intricate textures, layered materials, and believable craftsmanship. This approach allows the costumes to honor the franchise's legacy while fitting naturally within a realistic cinematic world. Creativity is evident throughout the wardrobe design. Instead of relying on simple recreations, each costume reflects the character's personality, role, and status within Eternia. Decorative patterns, symbolic details, battle-worn finishes, and carefully selected materials help communicate history and individuality, making every major character visually distinctive. The costumes also demonstrate strong practicality. Armor appears designed for movement during combat, clothing reflects the demands of different environments, and accessories feel functional rather than purely decorative. This practicality enhances the authenticity of the performances by allowing the actors to move naturally during dramatic scenes and action sequences. He-Man's costume successfully captures the essence of the legendary hero while adapting it for live-action storytelling. His iconic armor, sword of power, and heroic silhouette remain instantly recognizable, but the design introduces greater texture, layered protection, and realistic materials that make the outfit feel suitable for an experienced warrior. The costume conveys strength, nobility, and confidence without appearing overly exaggerated, striking an effective balance between comic book inspiration and cinematic realism. Skeletor receives one of the film's most visually striking costume designs. His dark armor, flowing robes, and imposing accessories reinforce his role as the supreme antagonist while maintaining the character's unmistakable appearance. The design embraces Gothic fantasy influences without abandoning the iconic visual elements that have made Skeletor one of the franchise's most recognizable villains. Every detail contributes to an intimidating presence that complements his commanding performance. Teela's costume reflects both her identity as a skilled warrior and her growing leadership within the story. Her armor is practical, durable, and designed for combat while incorporating recognizable colors and stylistic references from earlier interpretations of the character. The wardrobe successfully balances protection, mobility, and visual appeal, reinforcing her competence without sacrificing authenticity. Evelyn's appearance effectively communicates intelligence, ambition, and mastery of dark magic. Her costume combines elegant design with mystical symbolism, using layered fabrics, intricate ornamentation, and darker color schemes to distinguish her from the heroes while maintaining her individuality alongside Skeletor. The result is a sophisticated visual identity that reflects both power and calculated restraint. The makeup and prosthetic work consistently support the film's immersive fantasy setting. Characters requiring supernatural or non-human features are presented with impressive craftsmanship that enhances realism rather than distracting from the performances. Prosthetics blend naturally with facial expressions and movement, allowing actors to deliver emotionally convincing performances without appearing restricted by heavy makeup. The visual effects in Masters of the Universe, 2026, play a fundamental role in transforming the franchise's ambitious fantasy mythology into a convincing live-action spectacle. Rather than existing solely to impress audiences with large-scale imagery, the CGI is used to enhance the storytelling by bringing Eternia's magic, legendary creatures, and epic battles to life. The effects consistently support the film's atmosphere, allowing viewers to accept the extraordinary elements of the world without feeling disconnected from the characters or narrative. A major strength of the CGI is its overall realism. Digital environments, magical energy, and large-scale action sequences are rendered with impressive detail, helping fantasy locations feel tangible rather than artificially constructed. The visual effects maintain believable textures, lighting, and environmental interactions, allowing the digital elements to blend naturally with practical sets and live-action performances. This level of realism strengthens the film's sense of scale while preserving the emotional impact of key scenes. Integration between practical filmmaking and computer-generated imagery is handled effectively throughout the film. Rather than overwhelming every sequence with visual effects, the production combines practical costumes, physical sets, stunt work, and CGI to create a more grounded viewing experience. This balanced approach prevents the spectacle from overshadowing the performances and helps maintain a believable fantasy world where digital effects complement rather than replace traditional filmmaking techniques. Consistency is another notable achievement. The visual quality remains stable across intimate character moments, large-scale battles, mystical environments, and supernatural encounters. Lighting, textures, and animation maintain a unified style throughout the film, ensuring that no individual sequence feels visually disconnected from the rest of the production. This consistency reinforces the film's polished presentation and contributes to its immersive atmosphere. The magical effects are among the most visually captivating aspects of the film. Energy-based powers, ancient spells, enchanted weapons, and mystical artifacts are presented with vibrant detail while remaining consistent with the mythology of Eternia. The visual representation of magic feels powerful and distinctive without becoming excessively exaggerated, helping each supernatural ability maintain its significance within the story. Creature design also stands out as a highlight of the visual effects work. Fantasy creatures and supernatural beings are created with a strong balance between imagination and realism, featuring detailed textures, lifelike movement, and convincing interactions with their surroundings. Rather than appearing as purely digital creations, these creatures feel like natural inhabitants of Eternia, enriching the world and expanding its mythology. The battle scenes successfully combine practical choreography with digital enhancements to create exciting and visually coherent action. Large-scale confrontations feature dynamic environments, magical powers, and massive armies without sacrificing clarity or emotional focus. The effects enhance the intensity of combat while allowing audiences to follow the progression of each conflict, ensuring that the spectacle never overshadows the narrative. The action choreography in Masters of the Universe, 2026, is designed to reflect both the mythic scale of the story and the physical identity of its characters. Rather than relying on chaotic, rapid editing, the film emphasizes structured, readable combat that allows each movement to carry weight and meaning. The fights feel deliberately staged to highlight strength, skill, and power differences between characters, especially in encounters involving He-Man and Skeletor. This approach gives the action a more classical, almost legendary quality, fitting the tone of a fantasy epic. Creativity is consistently present in the way battles are constructed. Each character fights in a style that reflects their personality and abilities. He-Man's combat is direct and forceful, Skeletor's is unpredictable and magically enhanced, while warriors like Teela rely on agility and precision. Magical elements are integrated into physical combat in imaginative ways, blending swordplay, energy bursts, and environmental manipulation. This fusion keeps the action visually engaging without losing coherence. Clarity is one of the strongest aspects of the choreography. Despite the large scale of many sequences, the camera remains controlled and purposeful, ensuring that viewers can follow each strike, spell, and movement. The editing avoids excessive fragmentation, allowing fights to unfold naturally. This makes even complex battles easy to understand, preventing the confusion that often affects high-intensity fantasy action films. The intensity of the action is consistently high, particularly in moments where personal stakes intersect with large-scale destruction. Battles feel physically demanding and emotionally charged, especially when characters are pushed to their limits or forced to make difficult sacrifices. The combination of practical stunts, performance energy, and visual effects creates a sense of real danger that sustains tension throughout the film. The confrontations between He-Man and Skeletor serve as the emotional and narrative centerpiece of the film's action. These battles are not just physical clashes but ideological and psychological confrontations, with each encounter escalating in both power and personal stakes. The choreography emphasizes contrast, He-Man's grounded strength against Skeletor's chaotic, magical unpredictability, making each duel feel distinct and progressively more dangerous. These sequences are among the most memorable in the film due to their scale, tension, and character significance. Large-scale battles between the forces of good and evil are staged with impressive scope and organization. Instead of becoming visually overwhelming, these conflicts are structured in a way that highlights key characters within the chaos. The battlefield feels alive, with shifting front lines, coordinated strategies, and moments of individual heroism. These sequences successfully capture the epic nature of a war for Eternia without losing narrative focus. Magical battles are some of the most visually dynamic moments in the film. Energy blasts, ancient spells, and supernatural phenomena are used in creative ways that influence the environment and alter the flow of combat. These confrontations feel powerful without becoming visually chaotic, and the film takes care to ensure that magic has clear rules and consequences within the story. This helps maintain consistency and prevents the supernatural elements from overwhelming the physical action. The soundtrack of Masters of the Universe, 2026, plays a crucial role in shaping the film's identity, blending sweeping orchestral fantasy themes with modern cinematic intensity. The main theme music is designed to feel heroic, mythic, and instantly recognizable, echoing the timeless battle between good and evil that defines Eternia. It carries a strong sense of nostalgia while still feeling freshly composed, giving the film its own musical signature rather than relying on older interpretations of the franchise. Emotionally, the score is highly effective in guiding the audience through the story's shifts in tone. During intimate character moments, the music becomes softer and more reflective, allowing relationships and internal struggles to take center stage. In contrast, large-scale battles are supported by powerful percussion, rising brass, and choral elements that heighten tension and emphasize the stakes of the conflict. This dynamic range ensures that the soundtrack consistently enhances emotional engagement rather than simply filling silence. In terms of memorability, the music succeeds in establishing several recurring motifs, particularly those associated with He-Man, Skeletor, and the mystical forces of Castle Grayskull. These motifs help reinforce character identity and narrative themes throughout the film, making key moments more impactful and easier to recall. While not every track is designed to stand alone outside the film, the core themes leave a lasting impression due to their strong melodic structure and emotional weight. The sound design in Masters of the Universe, 2026, is equally detailed and immersive, contributing significantly to the film's sense of realism within a fantasy setting. Every weapon has a distinct auditory identity, from the heavy impact of swords clashing to the sharp, resonant energy of enchanted artifacts. These sounds are crafted to feel powerful and physically grounded, reinforcing the weight and danger of each confrontation. Magic is one of the most distinctive elements of the soundscape. Spells, energy bursts, and supernatural forces are accompanied by layered audio textures that combine deep resonant tones, ethereal echoes, and sharp sonic bursts. This careful design ensures that magic feels both otherworldly and impactful, giving each spell a sense of scale and consequence. The audio language of magic also helps differentiate characters and factions, making their abilities instantly recognizable. Environmental effects further enhance immersion, with attention given to wind, echoes in ancient structures, battlefield chaos, and the ambient sounds of Eternia's diverse landscapes. Whether inside the halls of Castle Grayskull or across open war-torn plains, the soundscape adapts to reinforce the mood and geography of each location. These subtle details help create a living, breathing world that extends beyond what is seen on screen. The editing in Masters of the Universe, 2026, is structured to support both its epic scale and its character-driven narrative, maintaining a careful balance between spectacle and story progression. Scene transitions are handled smoothly, often using visual or thematic bridges, such as magical energy shifts, environmental match cuts, or character-driven reaction shots, to maintain continuity across vastly different locations and tones. This gives the film a fluid sense of movement, helping the world of Eternia feel interconnected rather than fragmented into isolated set pieces. Runtime efficiency is generally strong, especially for a fantasy film of this scale. While the story takes time to establish its mythology, factions, and emotional stakes, the pacing ensures that exposition never overwhelms momentum. Key plot points are introduced at measured intervals, allowing audiences to absorb world building without feeling stalled. Some slower sequences are intentionally placed to deepen character relationships and reinforce emotional stakes, rather than serving as filler, which helps justify the film's length. The narrative rhythm is one of the film's most carefully managed elements. The story alternates effectively between high-intensity action, quieter character moments, and mythological exploration. This ebb and flow prevents fatigue during large-scale battle sequences while ensuring that quieter scenes still carry narrative importance. The film builds momentum steadily toward its major confrontations, with each act escalating both emotional and physical stakes in a controlled, deliberate manner. For the most part, the film avoids feeling like it drags. Even in its slower sections, there is usually a clear narrative purpose, whether it is developing character relationships, expanding the mythology of Eternia, or setting up future conflicts. However, viewers more focused on constant action may find certain exposition-heavy or world-building segments slightly extended. These moments, while important, do occasionally slow the immediate pace of the story, even if they contribute positively to overall depth and coherence. The emotional impact of Masters of the Universe, 2026, is one of its more surprising strengths, largely because the film commits to treating its mythic fantasy world with genuine human stakes. Rather than relying only on spectacle, it consistently builds emotional weight through character decisions, sacrifice, loyalty, and the cost of power. This grounding allows the audience to connect with events that might otherwise feel distant or purely fantastical. The film delivers several strong emotional peaks, especially during moments where heroism and personal sacrifice intersect. Scenes involving He-Man's responsibility as Eternia's protector carry a sense of burden rather than effortless victory, making his triumphs feel earned. Moments where Tila steps into leadership, or where Man-at-Arms expresses quiet pride and concern, also provide meaningful emotional uplift. One of the most powerful emotional highs comes from confrontations that force characters to choose between personal bonds and greater responsibility. These moments are handled with restraint rather than melodrama, which actually makes them more impactful. The combination of music, performance, and visual framing elevates these scenes into memorable emotional set pieces. The emotional lows are centered around loss, betrayal, and the consequences of unchecked ambition. Skeletor's actions create ripple effects that affect both heroes and civilians, reinforcing that the conflict is not abstract but deeply personal. These darker moments are not overly grim, but they are serious enough to give weight to the story's stakes. Evelyn's more independent motivations also contribute to emotional complexity, as her choices blur the line between loyalty and self-interest. This adds tension to the villain side of the story, creating moments of unease rather than simple antagonism. The film uses these emotional dips effectively to balance its more triumphant sequences. Character attachment develops steadily throughout the film rather than instantly. The audience is given time to understand each major figure, He-Man's sense of duty, Tila's growth, Man-at-Arms' mentorship, the Sorceress's wisdom, and Skeletor's overwhelming ambition. Because these arcs are developed gradually, emotional investment feels earned rather than forced. By the second half of the film, viewers are more deeply invested in the outcomes of key relationships and conflicts. The emotional grounding of these characters ensures that victories feel satisfying and losses feel meaningful, strengthening overall engagement. Masters of the Universe, 2026, leans heavily into classic mythic storytelling, using its fantasy framework to explore themes that feel both timeless and emotionally grounded. Rather than presenting heroism as simple strength or victory in battle, the film frames it as a continuous choice shaped by responsibility, sacrifice, and moral clarity. This gives the narrative a stronger emotional backbone and elevates it beyond a standard good versus evil conflict. Heroism in the film is portrayed as something earned rather than assumed. He-Man's journey emphasizes that true heroism is not just about power, but about restraint, judgment, and the willingness to protect others even at personal cost. Supporting characters also reflect different forms of heroism, Tila through action and leadership growth, Man-at-Arms through guidance and sacrifice, and even the sorceress through her quiet guardianship of Eternia's balance. This layered approach makes heroism feel multifaceted rather than one-dimensional. Responsibility is one of the film's strongest thematic pillars. The story repeatedly highlights how power, especially magical or political, comes with consequences that cannot be ignored. He-Man's burden as Eternia's protector is central to this theme, as he constantly must balance personal identity with duty. The film makes it clear that avoiding responsibility leads to chaos, while accepting it, even reluctantly, is what allows civilization and hope to endure. Leadership is explored through contrast between characters who lead through wisdom, force, manipulation, or experience. Tila's evolving role highlights leadership as something learned through hardship and decision-making rather than inherited authority. Man-at-Arms represents disciplined, grounded leadership rooted in experience, while Skeletor represents the opposite, control through fear and domination. This contrast reinforces the idea that true leadership is measured by protection and guidance, not power alone. Courage is depicted in both physical and emotional forms. Physical courage is shown through battles and direct confrontations, but emotional courage is equally important. Characters are often forced to confront fear, doubt, and loss. The film emphasizes that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. This makes even smaller character moments feel meaningful within the larger narrative. The theme of family is especially significant in grounding the story's emotional core. Relationships between He-Man, Tila, and Man-at-Arms form a surrogate family structure built on trust, mentorship, and shared responsibility. These bonds are tested throughout the film, reinforcing the idea that family is defined not just by blood, but by loyalty and shared purpose. This emotional layer gives the fantasy conflict a personal dimension that deepens audience investment. Destiny is treated with nuance rather than rigidity. While the mythological elements of Eternia suggest a predetermined fate, the film consistently emphasizes choice and agency. Characters are not simply bound to destiny, they actively shape it through their decisions. This balance allows the narrative to maintain its mythic tone while still feeling modern and character-driven, avoiding the trap of fatalism. Masters of the Universe, 2026, demonstrates a strong respect for its original source material, approaching the franchise with a balance of reverence and modernization. Rather than attempting a direct recreation of earlier animated or toy-based interpretations, the film reimagines Eternia and its characters in a way that fits contemporary cinematic expectations while preserving their essential identities. Character accuracy is handled with care. He-Man retains his core identity as a noble warrior chosen to defend Eternia, while Skeletor remains a commanding embodiment of ambition and dark power. Tila, Man-at-Arms, the Sorceress, and Evil Lyn are all recognizable in personality and function, even if their roles are slightly expanded or deepened for narrative complexity. Importantly, none of the characters feel fundamentally altered beyond recognition. Instead, they are evolved to support a more mature storytelling approach. Lore accuracy remains largely faithful, with the mythology of Castle Grayskull, the Sword of Power, and the eternal struggle for control of Eternia preserved as central narrative pillars. The film expands on the lore in ways that feel natural, adding depth to ancient history and magical systems without contradicting established foundations. This approach strengthens the world building while maintaining continuity with long-standing franchise elements. Visual accuracy is one of the film's strongest ties to the original material. Iconic designs such as Skeletor's skull-like visage, He-Man's armor, and Castle Grayskull's imposing structure are clearly recognizable, even though they have been updated with more realistic textures and cinematic detail. The visual reinterpretation respects nostalgia while ensuring the world feels believable in live-action form. Story adaptation takes more creative freedom but remains faithful in spirit. The core conflict between good and evil is preserved, along with themes of destiny, courage, and responsibility. However, the narrative structure is expanded to allow for deeper character arcs and more interconnected storytelling, giving the film a more modern epic fantasy feel rather than a straightforward episodic adventure. The film includes a thoughtful amount of fan service that enhances rather than overwhelms the narrative. Easter eggs are woven into background details, such as subtle references to classic locations, weapons, and iconic transformations. These elements are placed organically within the world rather than highlighted for attention, rewarding observant fans without distracting from the main story. References to the broader Masters of the Universe mythology appear through dialogue, ancient artifacts, and visual storytelling. These nods acknowledge the franchise's long history, including elements familiar from earlier animated interpretations and toy lore, without requiring prior knowledge to understand the plot. Nostalgic moments are primarily tied to character entrances, musical cues, and iconic transformations. These scenes are designed to evoke recognition and emotional response, especially during key hero and villain confrontations, while still serving the story rather than interrupting it for pure nostalgia. From a general viewer standpoint, Masters of the Universe 2026 is likely to be an engaging and visually impressive fantasy adventure, even for those unfamiliar with the franchise. The entertainment value is consistently high due to its combination of large-scale action, mystical world-building, and clear good versus evil storytelling. The film avoids overly complex narrative barriers, instead focusing on a straightforward emotional journey that makes it easy to follow even for newcomers. Accessibility is one of its strongest qualities. Despite its rich mythology, the film introduces its world gradually through character interactions, visual storytelling, and context-driven exposition. Viewers are not required to have prior knowledge of Eternia, Castle Grayskull, or the broader lore to understand what is happening. This makes the film approachable while still offering depth for those who want to explore its details more closely. The fun factor is also a major highlight. The film embraces the spectacle of fantasy cinema, epic battles, magical confrontations, heroic transformations, and larger-than-life villains, without becoming overly serious or self-indulgent. Moments of action and wonder are balanced with emotional beats and occasional lightness, creating an experience that feels energetic and entertaining throughout. Casual audiences are likely to enjoy it most as a straightforward, visually rich blockbuster with strong heroic themes. From a franchise fan perspective, Masters of the Universe 2026 shows a clear respect for the source material and the legacy of Eternia. The film takes care to preserve iconic character identities, mythological structures, and visual signatures that define the franchise. Key elements such as He-Man's heroism, Skeletor's dominance, Castle Grayskull's mystique, and the magical nature of the universe are all handled with attention and reverence. Character portrayals are generally faithful while allowing for modern depth and emotional expansion. Fans will recognize the essence of each major figure, even when their roles are updated or slightly reinterpreted for narrative complexity. Importantly, no character is radically altered in a way that undermines their core identity, which helps maintain trust with longtime followers of the franchise. World-building accuracy is another strong point. Eternia is expanded in meaningful ways while staying consistent with established lore and aesthetics. Classic locations, magical systems, and thematic elements are preserved and enhanced rather than replaced. This creates a sense of continuity that respects the franchise's history while allowing it to evolve into a more cinematic and immersive experience. Compared to earlier adaptations, especially the 1987 live-action film and various animated interpretations, Masters of the Universe 2026 represents a far more balanced and mature evolution of the franchise. Where earlier versions often leaned either too heavily into camp or remained constrained by limited storytelling scope, this film successfully blends mythic seriousness with the franchise's inherent larger-than-life charm. Characterization is significantly improved. Skeletor feels more strategically threatening and less theatrical, while He-Man is given greater emotional depth beyond being a straightforward heroic figure. Supporting characters such as Teela and Evelyn benefit the most from this update, gaining clearer motivations and stronger narrative agency than in many previous adaptations. In terms of lore and world building, this version expands Eternia into a fully realized cinematic universe, something earlier adaptations only hinted at. The mythology of Castle Grayskull, the balance of power, and the ancient magical systems are treated with greater consistency and narrative weight, making the world feel more cohesive and believable. When compared to major fantasy blockbusters such as The Lord of the Rings, Dune, or modern superhero-driven fantasy franchises, Masters of the Universe, 2026, holds its ground primarily through its visual identity and mythic simplicity. While it may not reach the narrative complexity or philosophical depth of Dune or the cinematic grandeur of The Lord of the Rings, it excels in delivering straightforward, high-energy fantasy storytelling with strong visual clarity. Its biggest competitive advantage lies in its accessibility and fun factor. Unlike some modern fantasy films that rely heavily on dense exposition or prolonged world building, this film keeps its narrative relatively streamlined, allowing audiences to remain engaged without feeling overwhelmed. Its action-driven pacing and iconic character designs also give it a more playful, mythological tone compared to darker or more grounded fantasy competitors. Against modern reboots of established franchises, Masters of the Universe, 2026, performs strongly in terms of balance between nostalgia and reinvention. Many recent reboots either over-rely on fan service or distance themselves too far from their source material, but this film manages a middle ground by respecting original designs and themes while updating storytelling structure and character depth. In contrast to reboots that prioritize shared universe expansion or excessive sequel setup, this film feels more self-contained and focused. That creative restraint allows it to deliver a more satisfying individual story experience rather than functioning primarily as franchise setup material.